Product provided by Nintendo. Tomorrow, everything changes. The Nintendo Switch 2 will have its Direct, and we'll learn a lot more about the next generation of Nintendo hardware. But what does that mean for my favorite Nintendo series, Xenoblade Chronicles? Well, let's get into it. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and it's kind of surreal just how much the Switch 2 has been rumored and talked about, not just on this channel, over the last couple of years, and tomorrow we'll finally know a decent amount of information, fingers crossed, about it, and even possibly a release date. So I wanted to go over my thoughts, my expectations, and what my own personal wish list is for the Switch 2 era when it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles. It'll be a combination of things that I actually expect to happen, but also things that I hope will happen. And we're gonna kind of start with one that I do hope will happen, and there even is some things pointing in the direction of it happening, and that is upgrades for Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, 3, and X Definitive Edition. With the release of Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, all the Xenoblade games are now on the Switch. So if the Switch 2 has some way to take Switch games and upgrade them to higher fidelity or even higher frame rates, that to me is what I want more than anything else on this list. Xenoblade just overall has some of the most beautiful art and set design I've ever seen in a video game series. And to just be able to see that with higher fidelity or even other potential visual upgrades, whatever they want to do, let alone playing just flat out better with 60 FPS, that to me would be an upgrade. That to me would be a selling point for the Switch 2. And it would be personal motivation for me to replay the entire series at a higher frame rate, let alone if the games even look better. I know there was some discussion, though I do not know how verifiable it actually is, that there's a secret setting in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition for a 60 FPS mode, which almost certainly would be a Switch 2 upgrade. Now granted, this whole conversation is essentially a monkey's paw situation, because what kind of path do they take when it comes to upgrading your Switch games? There's a few that I think they could do. They could just go the Xbox route where it's fully backwards compatible. You don't have to pay anything extra. You just, like, boot the game up and it runs better. At least that's how I think the Xbox handles it. Look, I don't have an Xbox Series of a PC. Can also go the way that some PlayStation studios handle it, and I do not like this way where you have to actually pay for the upgrade. Sometimes you even have to just buy the game again. Hello, Persona 5 Royal. I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibility that Nintendo would require to purchase an upgrade for like higher fidelity when it comes to graphics or just higher frame rate. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the route Nintendo goes. There is another way they can go about monetizing it though that I think kind of sounds more Nintendo to me than just simply buying an upgrade, and that is bundling into like Nintendo Online and the expansion pass. Pretty much their main way to incentivize getting the expansion pass is like, hey, we have some DLC though, also a bit more emulation. So it's just like bundling in, hey, your Switch games, if you have Nintendo Online and the expansion pass, all your Switch games, which you probably have quite a few of, yeah, a lot of them will just run and look better if you play on the Switch 2 with the expansion pass. That is the direction I think is probably likely for Nintendo, though anything is absolutely possible. My preferred one would just be for it to be free, and I mean like, yeah, duh, but it's one of those things where we'll just have to wait and see. At least either way when it comes to Xenoblade, we don't have to worry about losing another title to the annals of history, like we almost did there with Xenoblade X being on the Wii U. You know, before Definitive Edition came out. I'm pretty sure Nintendo said most games from the Switch will just be backwards compatible on the Switch too, so even if there aren't any upgrades, at least they'll be playable. So like worst case scenario, probably cost like 10, 15 bucks, which will absolutely suck, don't get me wrong, but again, a wait and see. Now, let's talk about the next Xenoblade entry, because I wouldn't be surprised if they announced it or at least tease it in the coming days with the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. For the longest time, people have used Xenoblade Chronicles just as a series to point to when it comes to Nintendo games being able to pump out games that look absolutely beautiful with art design and direction that is able to rival other mainline AAA studios and massive games that are out there. And that's because Monolith does such a good job when it comes to actual world design and optimization for their games to run on what is comparatively inferior hardware when it comes to actual output compared to the competition. So it wouldn't surprise me if, even though Xenoblade X Definitive Definitive Edition just came out, they want to advertise something Xenoblade related for the Switch 2. Now, what we were just talking about when it came to Switch 2 upgrades for pre-existing Xenoblade Chronicles games, that might just be the way they go about doing it, and they show off, hey, here's a before and after. Look how much prettier they look. Look how much crisper this game experience is. Look at the frames here, people. Let's count them individually. And honestly, I think that's probably the safer bet than them just announcing Xenoblade 4 tomorrow. But, like, if it does happen, it wouldn't particularly surprise me. Xenoblade Chronicles kind of follows a pattern, and I've talked about this over the last few years when it comes to its release cadence. We had Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and then we had the 3DS port and also X. Then we had Xenoblade 2. And this pattern of putting two other things in between mainline numbered games kind of follows. Because in between 2 and 3, we had Torn of the Golden Country and Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition. Then we had Xenoblade 3. And then after that, we've had Future Redeemed, and now Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. So if we're still following that pattern, the next game is like lined up to be the next mainline Xenoblade Chronicles game. Almost certainly called Xenoblade Chronicles 4. Unless they want to throw a curveball, which I really don't think they will, and change up the naming pattern. But if they do, I think the play would be Xenoblade Saga, and you just swap Chronicles for Saga. I don't really see them dropping the Xenoblade out of the naming convention because finally, after so long, the Xeno series finally has some brand recognition when it comes to Xenoblade, and I just don't think, as a company, any reasonable individual in, like, the marketing division would go, now that we have all this brand recognition, let's throw it away and rename it. I just don't see that happening. It just doesn't sound like a smart business plan. Could it still end up working? Maybe. Probably. But it's just like an additional risk that you do not need to take, especially when Xenoblade is seemingly still in the process of growing. And look, I don't think for the Switch 2, Monolith are going to go back individually to each of the Xenoblade games and make them again from the ground up to fully benefit off of more powerful hardware. Chances are it'll just be like higher resolution, maybe you like tighten up the AA and let the games pump out some more frames. I'm not expecting like the moon here, but when it comes to a potential Xenoblade Chronicles 4, where you would believe or imagine that game would be built from the ground up to work and run on the Switch 2, possibly also brought down to also work on the Switch, or vice versa, who knows. Potentially, though, there's a world out there where the next Xenoblade Chronicles game that we see is built from the ground up to work on the hardware of the Switch 2. With all the power that it will be able to pump out. And the rumor mill has been, and again, I don't know how verifiable this is, but it seems likely to me, that the Switch 2 will be somewhere between a PlayStation 4 and an Xbox Series S, which, yeah, there was some absolutely beautiful games on those pieces of kit. And while I think developers far too often prioritize just graphical fidelity, instead of making sure the game runs well on the freaking hardware, I won't go on my soapbox today, don't worry about that. It's not like these pieces of kits didn't have beautiful games that also ran at 60 FPS or had options to run at 60 FPS. And with Xenoblade Chronicles X, which was designed with the Wii U, having that sense of scale and grandeur and visual beauty to it, just imagine what you can do on far, far more powerful hardware. I'm borderline salivating at the possibilities of what Nintendo and Monolith could possibly put out here. But at the end of the day, it's not like Xenoblade 4, or whatever it'll be called, is going to be the only thing Xenoblade on the Switch 2 at some point. Heck, we had Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition, Xenoblade 2, 3, Future Redeemed Torna, and Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition all on the Switch. Chances are there'll be multiple entries for Xenoblade Chronicles on the Switch 2 during its lifespan. I am hoping, again, with the asterisk being that I haven't gotten to the new big story section for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, because I'm taking my time there. I just got Flight unlocked, by the way. Beautiful. Don't worry. Love it. Pending any information I learn there, I'm hoping, just for, like, mechanics' sake, we see a Xenoblade Chronicles X2 at some point. If they don't do that one theory that I had a while back, and that is just Xenoblade Chronicles 4, but with the mechanics of Xenoblade X. Look, as an absolute fanatic for Xenoblade Chronicles X, I wouldn't particularly mind that, though at the same time, I would love to see the characters that cast the world of Mira just brought back to life again at some point down the line for Xenoblade Chronicles X2, because there are so many questions original Xenoblade X raised that I highly doubt the new story for X Definitive Edition will be able to address all of them. And even in the little snippets of additional stuff and goodness I've gotten in Definitive Edition up to now, they're like building up the universe in that game, and like, yeah, I would absolutely love more. I want to see how far we can take the skill system. I want to have different types of skills that have their own different niches. There's just so much potential here for great game iteration, and I want to see it. Again, pending any new story developments in X Definitive Edition. I know for a lot of people it's rather easy, and for good reason, to be rather pessimistic about the state of gaming going into the future. What with a lot of scummy business practices becoming more and more normalized with each passing year, alongside a bunch of trends which just don't inspire a ton of optimism. Xenoblade Chronicles is like one of those series that I'm always just optimistic about. Monolith really haven't let me down yet. Every time they pump out a game, it's either my game of the year, or it's like, hey, this is pretty much a top 10 game of all time for me. Or at least has been at some point in time. It's like, hell, I love Xenoblade X so much that it feels like I'm playing it for the very first time again, despite having played it like twice, or like 1.5 times. So when it comes to Monolith, they are kind of operating in, I have faith in you until you give me reason not to, and I'm not really seeing any trend to indicate Monolith giving me a reason not to have faith in them for a while. They continually pump out some of my favorite games, and while I don't always agree with necessarily how they're designed entirely, the good always outweighs the bad for me. And heck, with Definitive Edition for Xenoblade Chronicles X, they, like, pretty much addressed most of the feedback that I had with Xenoblade Chronicles as a series, and what I thought the series would need to do to become bigger and bigger, or just better, flat out. Address how slow the early game can really be, and, like, yeah, they did that with Quick Recast. It's funny how that one really simple system, like, addresses 95% of the complaints that I had with the combat and the overall gameplay loop in Xenoblade Chronicles. And it's a series that I hope in the future, when it comes to new Xenoblade games, we just see it in some shape, form, or fashion. I think it's just that good of an idea. I want to see iteration on the skill system. That combined with just how big and grand it could possibly make worlds be in the future when it comes to Switch 2 releases for Xenoblade Chronicles, it excites me. There's not too many other big studios out there that create games that have that sense of wonder like Xenoblade Chronicles is able to instill in me on a frequent basis, especially with a game like Xenoblade Chronicles X. Like, think of it, how many, like, big open world games have we had in the, like, what, last 15 years? That turn their entire world on their head just as much as Xenoblade Chronicles X does with the scale and then the flying scale system. Or let alone being a giant sci-fi open world and giving you a mech to just not only fight with, but also move around the world with. A lot of the time, features or systems like that feel as if they're relegated to, like, one-off scenarios, so their stale combat mechanics don't become hyper-repetitive when you play them more than 5 minutes, but that's just not the case with Xenoblade and Monolith. If they give you something really cool to do, chances are it's a big feature for the game and not just a one-off little gameplay gimmick. And it's something I really have grown to appreciate when it comes to Monolith's game design. And it's something that I hope they double down on when it comes to the future, especially for games on the Switch too. I want to see more locations, more worlds with that sense of scale that the Xenoblade Chronicles series is able to uniquely, or at least is in a very small cast of other games that are able to elicit that sense of scale and wonder that makes you want to explore the world and actually gives you the ability to. It's like, I think Xenoblade X does it better than the other games, but it's not like the other ones are slouches in this regard either. So here's to the future. And like, in before they don't even mention Xenoblade at the Direct, that would be really funny. But like, who knows? Dare to dream. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Leave a comment down below with what you would love to see out of Xenoblade as a series on the Switch 2. Give me your wildest dream, and also what you think will likely happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, have a great day. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you liked the video and you want to see more content, I know I would appreciate it. Bye bye everybody. Go play some video games. Until we meet again!